It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon when the bustling McDonald's on Sunset Boulevard suddenly became the backdrop for an encounter that would leave people speechless. Among the usual crowd of patrons, a figure stood out: Keanu Reeves. Known for his roles in iconic films like The Matrix and John Wick, Keanu was used to the spotlight, but this time, the focus wasn't on his fame or fortune. It wasn't a typical paparazzi frenzy or fans begging for an autograph. In fact, there were no fans asking for selfies at all, just the usual clatter of trays, the faint sound of children laughing, and the scent of fries in the air. As Keanu stood in line waiting for his order, something seemed off. His face was pale, his eyes darted nervously from side to side. He tried to brush it off, but a small voice cut through the noise of the restaurant, soft and almost eerily calm. It was coming from a 5-year-old boy sitting at a table nearby. The child had been quietly playing with his Happy Meal, his fingers tracing the plastic toy. But something about the moment froze the air around them. The boy, as if sensing Keanu's presence in a way no one else did, whispered something that stopped the actor dead in his tracks. Keanu turned slowly, his gaze meeting the innocent, wide-eyed stare of the child. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The boy's whisper was so quiet, so precise, it sent chills down Keanu's spine. The McDonald's was no longer a fast food joint, it had become the stage for something far more unsettling. Keanu's usual calm demeanor faltered as a wave of confusion and unease washed over him. His lips trembled, and his hands seemed to shake slightly as he slowly backed away from the counter, his mind racing. What did the boy just say? Was it a coincidence, or was something deeper happening? The child's words didn't sound like a playful observation. There was something cryptic, something that seemed to unearth a long-forgotten fear from the depths of Keanu's soul. Something so specific that it left him questioning everything. Before anyone could make sense of the situation, Keanu pulled out his phone and quickly dialed 911. His usually composed voice wavered, a crack forming under the weight of what he had just heard. The operator on the other end could barely understand him as he rushed to explain. There was a sense of urgency in his every word, a plea for help. Something wasn't right. The boy's whisper, though soft, had carried the kind of weight that could send even the calmest into a panic. Keanu Reeves, a man who had faced countless challenges on screen, was now facing something far more real, something far more terrifying. But what had the boy said? What was the true nature of this bizarre encounter? Was it just a fluke, or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? Keanu's heart raced as he stepped back from the counter, his mind reeling from the whisper of that child. A wave of unease spread over him like a cold shiver, each second stretching into eternity. He knew something had just happened, but he couldn't quite grasp what it was. His eyes flicked to the boy, still sitting at his table, a small smirk playing on his lips as if he knew a secret the world wasn't privy to. Keanu couldn't tear his gaze away from him. The boy didn't look like a typical child. His wide, innocent eyes seemed to knowing, almost like he was aware of something hidden deep beneath the surface. Keanu could feel the air thickening around him, charged with a sense of danger he couldn't quite define. As he fumbled with his phone, trying to compose himself enough to explain what was happening to the 911 operator, the child's whisper replayed in his mind. It was nothing extraordinary, not at first glance. The boy had simply said, "You're not alone." But it was the way he said it, the tone, the weight behind those words that caused Keanu to break into a cold sweat. Keanu had been in situations of high tension before: battle scenes, stunts, confrontations on set, but nothing prepared him for this. This wasn't a film. This wasn't scripted. The tension in the air was palpable, suffocating. He finally managed to speak to the operator, his voice shaky but urgent. "I don't know what's going on. I was just standing at the counter when a child whispered something to me. It didn't feel right." He said, "I'm not alone, but I don't." Keanu's words trailed off as the operator calmly asked him to stay on the line. But Keanu wasn't listening. He was too distracted by the child, whose gaze never wavered, as if waiting for something. The restaurant, once filled with the sounds of customers ordering, eating, and laughing, seemed to fade into the background. Keanu's focus was locked on the boy. He felt an unexplainable pull, as though the child was the key to something crucial, something that could explain the strange and unsettling sensation clawing at his mind. Without thinking, Keanu began to walk towards the table, his body almost moving on its own accord. The boy continued to watch him, his small fingers still toying with the Happy Meal toy in front of him. There was something deeply unsettling in that calmness, like the child knew more than he should. Keanu stopped just short of the table, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. "Who are you?" Keanu asked softly, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. The boy's eyes glistened in the dim light, his small hands still gripping the toy. For a second, Keanu thought he saw a flash of something darker beneath the child's innocent exterior, like a shadow passing behind his gaze. "I know about your dreams," the boy replied in a voice so quiet, it almost seemed to blend with the background noise. "I've been watching you for a long time." Keanu blinked, unsure of how to respond. Dreams. Watching. What was the boy talking about? Before Keanu could ask any further questions, the boy added, "They want you to remember. They're coming." Keanu's blood ran cold. He'd heard of people being stalked by fans, even haunted by strange experiences, but this felt different. This felt like a warning. The child's words weren't playful or random, they were precise, specific. It was as if he knew something only Keanu could understand, some buried truth that the actor wasn't ready to confront. "Who is they?" Keanu asked, leaning closer. The boy just smiled, but it wasn't a smile of innocence. It was knowing, cryptic, as if the boy had seen far too much for his years. The air between them grew heavier with each passing second. Then, as if reading Keanu's mind, the boy added, "It's too late. They've already found you." Keanu's stomach churned. His mind scrambled for answers, but before he could say another word, a sudden rush of noise erupted from behind him. The door to the McDonald swung open, and a group of men entered, their footsteps heavy and deliberate. Keanu's instincts kicked in. These weren't ordinary customers. These men had a presence about them, a purposeful gait that suggested they weren't here for a meal. One of them locked eyes with Keanu, and a chill ran down his spine. He recognized that stare. It was a look of recognition, and something darker, like they were waiting for him. The boy's smile deepened as he turned towards the newcomers. Without missing a beat, he stood up from his chair, holding his Happy Meal toy tightly in his hand, and began to walk toward the door. The group of men watched him, their faces unreadable, but their attention was fixed on Keanu. Keanu felt a jolt of panic. This was no longer just a strange encounter with a child, it was turning into something much more sinister. What was happening? What had the boy meant? Who were these men, and what did they want with him? As the boy neared the door, he paused for a moment, turning back to Keanu with one last look. "You can't run," the boy whispered. "They'll find you wherever you go." Then, in a blink, the boy was gone, leaving Keanu standing frozen in the middle of the McDonald's, his heart racing, the weight of the moment settling in like a heavy fog. Something terrible was unfolding, and Keanu was at the center of it. He had to figure out what was happening, and fast. But where could he turn? Who could he trust? The men were moving toward him now, their intent clear, and the truth was becoming undeniable. Whatever was going on, it had already begun, and it would only escalate from here. The atmosphere in the McDonald's grew tense, a heavy silence enveloping the space. Keanu's thoughts raced as he scanned the room, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. The group of men moved with calculated precision toward him, their footsteps synchronized like a well-rehearsed performance. Keanu could feel the weight of their gaze, as if they had been tracking his every move for days, maybe even longer. The boy, who had once seemed like an innocent child caught in a random moment, now appeared to be something far more sinister. Keanu's mind kept replaying his words, "They're coming." Keanu's fingers tightened around his phone, but he realized it was too late to call for help. The operator, still on the line, had heard nothing after the boy's cryptic warning. What could she do? Who could help him now? The walls of the restaurant seemed to close in around him as his pulse quickened. Suddenly, the lead man, the one who had locked eyes with Keanu earlier, stopped in front of him. He was tall, with a dark, unreadable expression, his features sharp and cold. He didn't speak at first, only looked Keanu up and down, as if assessing him like prey. Then, his lips curled into a slight smile. "You're him, aren't you?" The man's voice was low, but it carried an unsettling authority. It wasn't a question, more of a statement. "We've been waiting for you." Keanu's breath hitched in his throat. His mind raced, waiting for him? For what? The question was like a weight in his chest, making it hard to breathe. "You've been chosen, Keanu. They've chosen you." The man's voice seemed to echo in the space between them, every word hanging heavy with meaning. Keanu's heart raced. He had no idea who they were. Who could possibly have chosen him? Was it some sort of elaborate joke? The boy's words reverberated in Keanu's mind. "It's too late. They've already found you." Another man stepped forward, his face shrouded in shadows. He spoke with a dark, ominous tone, as if the air itself trembled in response to his words. The time has come. You've known the truth for years, but it's been buried deep in your mind. Tonight, you'll remember. Tonight, the final chapter begins. Keanu's legs felt weak, as if his entire body had been drained of energy. What truth? What final chapter? Panic swirled in his chest, but he clung to the single thread of logic that remained. This couldn't be real. But as the men moved closer, the walls of the McDonald's began to pulse, as if the entire restaurant was shifting in sync with the growing tension. Keanu's vision blurred, his mind struggling to process the events unfolding before him. Suddenly, the boy reappeared, standing beside the men. He was no longer smiling, but his eyes were burning with an intensity that chilled Keanu to his core. The child stepped forward, his small hand reaching out toward him, as if beckoning him into the unknown. "It's time," the boy whispered, his voice cutting through the heavy air. "They're waiting for you. We've always been waiting for you." Keanu could feel the room closing in, the walls pressing against him as if the very space around him was collapsing in on itself. His body froze, paralyzed by a mix of terror and confusion. Every part of him screamed to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. Something inside him, the deepest part of his being, knew that running would only make it worse. The man at the front who had been leading the others stepped forward again, his eyes narrowing. "It's time to remember. Come with us, Keanu. The veil is lifting." And then it happened. The McDonald's, the people, the world around Keanu, everything warped and flickered like a broken television screen. The bustling restaurant vanished, replaced by an eerie, otherworldly landscape. The sky overhead was a dark, swirling abyss, and the ground beneath him felt unsteady, as if reality itself had unraveled. Keanu's breath caught in his throat as he looked around. The men, now looming like specters, surrounded him in the shifting void. The boy, too, was still there, watching with those piercing eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Do you see it now?" the boy asked softly. "The truth. The truth you've been running from your whole life." Keanu's mind spun. Everything he thought he knew about the world, about himself, was crumbling before his eyes. What was this place? Was he dreaming? Or had something far more sinister taken hold of him? The man in front of him spoke again, his voice now reverberating through the strange space. "You've been marked, Keanu. You've always been a part of this, even when you didn't know it." Keanu's head swam. Was this the truth he had been too afraid to face? Was this the reason he had felt this strange, unsettling pull for so long? A realization hit him, sharp and sudden. He wasn't dreaming. He was awake. And what was happening now was real. Too real. The boy's eyes gleamed, a haunting light in them. "Now it begins. The final chapter of your story." Keanu's mind scrambled for a way out, but he could feel the walls closing in tighter, the truth that had eluded him for years now undeniable. Whatever was coming, whatever these men and this child were a part of, was here. And there was no escaping it. As the darkness surged around him, Keanu realized that the choice had never been his to make. The final chapter was already in motion. He was no longer just an observer in his own life. He was about to become a key player in a story far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The truth, as terrifying as it was, had come for him at last. And there was no turning back. Keanu stood in the swirling abyss, the eerie, otherworldly space pressing in on him like a vice. The figures around him, the men, the boy, seemed to shift and pulse with the darkness. Everything he thought he knew about the world, his career, his life, it was all disintegrating before his eyes. And yet, even in the midst of his fear, something else stirred within him. A sense of awareness, of purpose. This was not just the end of a chapter. This was the beginning of something new, something much larger than anything he had ever known. The truth had found him. He could no longer deny it, no longer run from it. It had been there all along, buried in his dreams, in his thoughts, in the strange feelings of déjà vu that haunted him during his quietest moments. Everything had led him to this point. But even in the face of such overwhelming uncertainty, Keanu felt a spark of clarity. He was not powerless. In that instant, he understood something that transcended the chaos around him. The greatest strength we have lies in our choice to confront what we fear most. Keanu took a deep breath, grounding himself in the present moment. The boy, whose eyes gleamed with knowledge far beyond his years, watched him with a curious intensity. The men around him, the shadows of his past and future entwined, waited expectantly. And then, without a word, Keanu stepped forward, walking toward the boy, toward the unknown. There was no running, no hiding from this. He wasn't just an actor in a story, he was the author of his own fate. Every choice he had made, every moment of doubt, had brought him here. And now, in the face of the most terrifying revelation of his life, he had a choice: to confront the truth or to turn away and live in ignorance. Keanu chose the truth. With a calm, unwavering voice, he looked the boy in the eyes and said, "I'm ready." The boy's expression softened. The men around him stopped moving, as if they had been waiting for this moment to unfold. The world around Keanu began to shift again, the swirling abyss dissolving like mist in the morning sun. As if the weight of 1,000 questions had been lifted, Keanu found himself standing in the middle of the McDonald's once more, the familiar sounds of the restaurant returning to his senses. The men were gone. The boy was gone. The strange, distorted reality had faded as though it had never existed. But Keanu knew better. It had been real. The truth had been revealed, not in a way he had ever expected, but in a way that had shown him something far more profound. His life, his path, his choices were part of something bigger, something beyond comprehension. As he stood there, still processing everything that had just happened, Keanu realized that the fear he had felt earlier was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of growth. True strength comes not from avoiding fear, but from facing it head-on, from choosing to walk through it, no matter how uncertain the path may be. And as Keanu stepped out of that McDonald's, the world outside looked the same. But he knew that he was different. He had found a new sense of purpose, a new understanding of his place in the world. And with it, a powerful reminder that the greatest challenges we face often lead to the most transformative growth. As he walked away, Keanu smiled to himself. The story had only just begun. This story, as strange and terrifying as it was, had revealed to him the most important truth of all. We are all part of a much bigger story, one that is constantly unfolding, and every decision we make shapes its course. So, no matter where you are in your life, no matter how dark or uncertain the road ahead may seem, remember this: you are the author of your own story. You have the power to choose, to confront, and to grow. And when the time comes to face your own truth, know that the strength lies within you to embrace it. The world may seem overwhelming at times, but when you choose to step into the unknown with courage, that's when the real magic begins.